Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I am Ann Pillsbury, and I'm here with Jenny Douglas on Pivot on Purpose, which is my weekly live dedicated to women of a certain age, sharing inspiration and information on creating lives of meaningful work, deep connection, and lots of joy. And just to introduce myself, I am a life and leadership coach, and I help women pivot to careers and lives of greater fulfillment, impact, and ease with my one-on-one coaching program called the Meant for More Method. And today I'm so excited. I have Jenny Douglas here with me. Jenny is a director of host experience and operations at Revel, which is a social and events platform for women in midlife and beyond who are reimagining themselves as they age. So perfect place to be. She sees herself as a midwife to any Revel member who's seeking to seek community or deepen the community they already have. She splits her time between Brooklyn and New York's Hudson Valley. And she is a newlywed, recently featured in the New York Times, that was a great article.
Yeah.
So welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Anne. I'm so happy that you invited me to participate and have a conversation with you. And I loved when we had breakfast together in Brooklyn a couple of months ago. So
yeah, we had to meet in real life, and I was like, I got to share Jenny with more people. She's so cool.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I'm flattered and honored.
So tell me about a time, one of your most pivotal points in your life. I know you've pivoted many times, but let's focus on one that was particularly important to you.
Well, I would say, there have been a few. One was, I grew up in Japan. I'm Canadian originally. So one critical pivot point, which I don't necessarily feel like I need to talk about more than the second one, which I'll talk about, was moving from Japan at age 18 to America for the first time. And I looked like a duck and I talked like a duck, but I wasn't a duck. I didn't feel American at all. I didn't have any cultural references, pop culture references. And it was a really, really hard time. So I had sort of that pivot notch in my belt. And then I would say, like in my adult life, I'm almost 59 now, but when about 15 years ago, I, without any notice or warning or preparation, found myself separated from my then husband of 15 years. And we had two daughters, age 8 and 13 at the time. And that to this day, I remember a friend who was a little further. I didn't know anyone who was divorced at the time that happened. And as I said, I didn't see it coming. But a friend, it's interesting, the kind of gifts that come calling that you don't ask for or expect. A friend or somebody I met, he wasn't even a friend, but somebody I met who was further along on the divorce path than I was, said, it's as if like your thumb is hit with a hammer. And it's so hard to imagine that at some later point, you're going to be grateful for that thumb being hit by a hammer. And I feel like in some ways, that my divorce taught me so much about who I was, about my own sense of courage, when everything that you know about yourself and your life and your expectations for the future comes crashing down like so much, china from the cabinets on the kitchen floor. And I've really come to feel, I feel like that experience taught me so much about any kind of crisis that precedes a pivot, and taught me a lot about bravery and courage. And it really did gird me, I would say, for all the pivots to come. And, I'm not dead yet. I've got some time. I feel like that was a real turning point for me. Like I didn't know what I needed to know or how I wanted to orient myself. I had to kind of crawl on my knees and learn by doing. But I came, interestingly, like that experience of my divorce where, everything as I knew it just suddenly evaporated. It was such a profound teacher for me. And it really, there's so much to say, but it really kind of made me feel for the first time and in a really lasting way, unafraid of change. I think before that time I had spent, because my marriage was not an easy one. There was definitely joy in it, but it was a hard one. And I think I felt like I was, spinning all these plates in the air, trying to keep them from crashing, trying to like keep stability at all costs because we had kids and There were so many reasons why I think a lot of us feel like it's too scary to imagine something other than what our life is already. And
Yes.
whether it's divorce or sickness, or, I mean, there's so many crises that any of us who have been lucky enough to reach mid-age
Yeah.
encounter. Like, there's
Yeah.
no way to grow older without loss of whatever.
Yes.
So I feel like my divorce was such a gift. It took me a long time to come see it as to come to see it as that, but it really did, and it oriented me in a way that, yeah, I just feel like, after my divorce, maybe 8 months after my ex left, I found this clown. I might have told you about this when we had breakfast, but a part-time clown slash muralist I met on the street in my neighborhood in Brooklyn. And she painted a Rumi quote on my living room wall against a navy background. It said, "Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment." And that
Oh,
would have been an idea that just was woo-woo and totally threatening to me at an earlier time in my life. And now, like, I think the idea of living in the question mark is where it's at, because that's when we're most alive. But it kind of is counter to, in the first part of our adulthood, for many of us, as we're trying to master what it is to be an adult, uh,
yes.
it's sort of counter to everything that we feel like we should be, which is like, do it right, don't make a fool of yourself, like, just you're trying to figure out how to be a human being, a grown-up human being. And I feel like the beautiful time of this time of life for me, and I see a lot of other women in midlife recognizing these fruits too, is that, oh my gosh, after trying so many years to like get it right and recognizing there's really no way to do that, we just can do the best we can. I'm at a point in my life now where I'm like, I just want to try, and I actually don't care about making mistakes. I don't care about making a fool of myself, because that shows that I'm reaching, and I don't
Yes.
play it safe. Because another beautiful gift, even though it can be a hard pill to swallow, of women in midlife, any of us, is that we recognize mortality is in sight, and
Yeah.
friends are getting sick. And I'm sorry to be rambling on so much, but like,
No, no, no. It's that, but it's such good stuff because it's
yeah,
all so true. And I think that is like the big pivot that I haven't even really thought about, but like there is that pivot between the first and second half of your life. And it's that first half, it's all about doing the right things, finding success, pleasing everybody. And then all of a sudden we hit this phase, and it's not necessarily related to age, I think. It could happen anywhere between 40 and whatever. But
right,
you realize that you're living your life for everybody else. And maybe it takes the situation of you, like you had, where everything that you've known is pulled
yeah,
out from underneath you.
right,
So there's a beauty and a gift in that, because then you need to rebuild. And at you were in your 40s, probably, right? So I mean,
yeah,
that you were rebuilding in a
yes.
completely new way.
Yeah, and it was so interesting. I look back. So if I'm 58 now, I think I was like 44 at the time of my split. And I truly felt like my life was over, that I had given the best years of my life to this marriage, that all my good years were behind me. And I realized, and I say this, I've been teaching, I created this divorce workshop workshop for women going through divorce out of
Mhm.
the thing that I was most needing, called grief and gratitude.
Mhm.
And I've been leading those, several times a year for the past 10 years. But as I share in my divorce workshops, it's sort of like, I was habituated to eating Cheerios with water and calling it a feast. And then
I love
I was like, just, you know, whatever, with my shoulders slumped, eating and feeling like I'm doing my job, and I don't even dare interrogate these assumptions, because it just
Yeah.
threatening. So I don't know if I would have left the marriage on my own or not. I may have. But the point is, yeah, what do I want to say? I want to say that you're right. Like that, that really gave me my first taste of, um, I don't know, just a kind of like courage that I wasn't sure that I had. And I went
Yeah.
on after that divorce, like my life opened up in whole new ways. Like, I went to India and taught creative writing at a boarding school in southern India near Bangalore, to a boarding school that exclusively serves children, Dalit children, who are formerly known as untouchables. And I traveled to Melbourne, Australia, to be the media liaison for the Council on the Parliament of World Religions, the world's largest spiritual conference, 5,000 spiritual leaders. And I just did all these things once I was like thrown from the nest.
Yes.
Because I just sort of felt, as my friend Elise says, who I work with on my grief and gratitude, we do these grief and gratitude workshops in collaboration. She's like, once you walk through the town square naked, which is what going through divorce can feel like what else do you have to lose?
Yeah. What do you tell women who are right in that very vulnerable spot? Like, right, I mean, right afterwards, how do they get through day to day until they can start rebuilding?
You know what I feel, and this is something that came to me when my ex looked up over his reading glasses to tell me he was no longer in love with me that Sunday night back in 2008. I remember it was as if this message just came to me from the skies, and it just I suddenly realized not only do I not know what tomorrow is going to look like, the next day was going to look like, but I didn't know what the next hour would look like. And I just suddenly had this idea that I wanted to be present for everything that happened to me, no matter what it was going to be. And I feel like that would be my advice, to not, it's so uncomfortable to feel so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I think just not rushing one's way through. I mean, another thing that I want to say is I think if we can be open to the idea that maybe things shouldn't go back to normal, I think there's this rupture, and how long is it going to take till I'm back to normal? And if we can toy with the idea that maybe these crises, which I'm not in any way trying to minimize just how hard and devastating a crisis can be, but there can be such a teaching in there too. And maybe that situation is helping to birth us into our next iteration of ourselves, which is a more compassionate self, maybe.
Yes.
Because
and it's trusting that your life is a perfectly written novel that you can't understand at the point, but there is, that there's a trusting in the greater plan that doesn't help with the grief. And you definitely, I'm not, as you said, I'm not trying to force some positivity that isn't there.
Yeah.
And relaxing and trusting into the knowing, that.
Well, I started these, I created this workshop, Grief and Gratitude, because I felt like we live in a culture that actively is not that comfortable with the idea of the value of grief, of sitting, of not rushing through. So the day after my ex and I split up, I went to Barnes and Noble in my neighborhood in Park Slope, Brooklyn, to look for books in the divorce section. And it was nothing that worked for me. It was divorce lawyers saying, totally inculcating fear in me. Here are the 10 things you need to do, and you need to do them yesterday. Yeah. Or you're feeling bad. Here are the 10 things you need to do to feel better. And I'm just actually, no. When you're going through these, you have to let grief have its way with you. And that can be kind of not that comforting to hear, but ultimately, the people who helped me the most when I was going through my divorce were not the people who pitied me or the people who offered me prescriptions on how to feel better, but the people who said, I stand with you. I stand with you. Whatever it takes, I'm not gonna, and you realize, as we all know, whatever the situation is, if we're kind of we're in mourning, we're in grief, that can be hard for other people to
sit with.
But the people who can do it, they are gold. You know, and that's all that I would counsel, just don't let yourself I was seeing, after my divorce, I saw every kind of healer imaginable. And I saw the karma doctor, and he said, every morning, wake up and ask yourself, what do I desire today? And give yourself that. And it was such a radical idea.
Yeah. So, because I was going to ask you specifically if they're tools. So it sounds like asking yourself that question, and you're a writer, so probably journaling or writing or creating space for yourself.
Sure.
Yeah. And then a big one for you, it sounds like, is community.
Huge. Yeah. I mean,
And
I
now
see,
your job is to seed and build community.
I know.
So I think, I find that women are really seeking and desperate for community. I think after COVID, particularly, re-engaging,
Yeah.
it's better. It's been a while now, but also I noticed that women are no, they're having changes, whether it's divorce or
Yeah.
they want something different, some kind of
Yeah.
and it isolates the people they've had before,
100.
so maybe their friends or their spouses aren't supporting them, and so
100.
it's like finding the next community. What are some of your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, as I had said, I do see myself as hosting director for Revel or hellorevel.com, as we
Hmm.
find on the web, as kind of a midwife to anyone looking to seed communities. And we do that on Revel through creating events, which can look like anything. They can be, it could be a webinar for 250 people if you have some beautiful, huge expertise that you want to be able to impart. Or it can be, 6 women sitting, in your living room talking about a book in person, or checking out a restaurant or a museum or a silent book club. Or it can be, a question that you have. You can create an event around a vulnerability. We've had people who have been like, I'm hosting Passover for the first time. I don't know how to set the table. I want to create an event around that. Or I know how to, we had an event on how to measure for a bra or how to shop for a guitar. It
Yeah.
can be anything. And, Nina Collins, my colleague, who's the chief creative officer of Revel, talks about Revel as the girlfriend in your pocket. So it's a great place. It's a great forum for women who are moving to new cities for the
Yes.
first time. I actually had I lead a daily meditation event on Revel at 10 a.m. Eastern called Sit Still. It's 10 minutes of sitting in silence. And then we leave the Zoom kind of camera on for the next 20 minutes. And anyone who wants to share anything about their silence with the group can. But I had a woman on just yesterday who just moved to Arizona. And she said, I moved to Scottsdale, Arizona a week ago, and I wanted to see who on Revel or who in Arizona, who on Revel was living in Arizona. And I had a date with 3 women, 3 revelers who I didn't know from Scottsdale. And I have like 3 holiday gifts, the gifts in the form of these new
Yes.
friends.
Yes.
So like to your point of like, I often find that, and I think you've probably experienced this too, like women in middle age, many of us are going through a transition, coming out of one, or have coming out of one, approaching one, or in one, whether
Yeah.
it's, it could be menopause, it could be empty nest, it could be reckoning with parents getting older, reckoning with
Right.
themselves getting older, relationship change.
The
There's
relationship shifting. Yeah.
yes,
Those seem
and
to be
to
the
your
big ones.
point,
Yes.
I think some of us sometimes feel like, gee, I may have my existing friends, but even friendships could be changing. We may
Yeah.
need different things out of friendships. And so wherever we are on the spectrum, whoever we are, whatever our needs, I do think that the idea of like bearing witness to each other on Revel and bearing witness and being witnessed. So there's this South African philosophy of Ubuntu that holds that the only way that I can be human is for you to reflect my humanity back at me. And
Yeah.
me, like, that's so beautiful. Like we old broads know that we can't be rescued. We don't want to be rescued. When I was younger, I might have wanted to be rescued.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
I feel like there is such beauty in getting and having to rescue myself. So please don't tell me what to do, but sit with me. And that's what we
Right.
do day in and day out, 24/7, 365 days a year on Revel.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful thing about being in a coaching relationship too, because with my clients as a coach, I hold them whole, resourceful, capable, and creative. So I'm not providing them with solutions. I'm providing them with a space for deep reflection and asking those questions. And you know that um that is so much more powerful at this stage of our lives as opposed to being told what we need to do, you know?
And I also think there's a particular beauty and power of getting together in a group. Like
Yes.
one can be beautiful too. But I
Hmm.
often find when I do Zoom workshops or if I have women around my living room, I like to say that we all have original medicine that we can offer one another. And we don't even know how our truth is going to land with each other. But I
Right.
found the more willing I am to be honest and vulnerable, the more it unwittingly gives permission for the rest of us to be honest and
Right.
vulnerable. And in doing so, there's so much healing that can come from that. You know, not to minimize the value of therapists and all the experts, but we have a lot of just expert wisdom born of having been alive, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and you discover you're not alone
for sure.
in
And
your
that's
thoughts,
like,
in your
that is
feelings,
my,
and you're like, it's when you start to, and it's such a brilliant model on Revel because the topics are coming up by the topics of the event. So you know that you're having a like-minded hive coming
yeah,
together,
yeah,
and that are probably, and I've hosted a number of workshops on Revel and have been amazed at how intimate, and I keep them small because I like to facilitate that kind of connection.
yeah.
And yeah, it's been really moving and incredible to
Right.
see
And especially
women come
against a
together.
backdrop of a culture that can, I mean, I personally have never felt invisible, just because I feel like I'm visible to the people in my life matter. And I'm not really, and I also love, frankly, getting a little older and not being the focus of the male gaze in a way that I was when I was younger. Like
Mhm.
I'm an observer. I love watching people, and I don't, so I'm less prone maybe to feeling worried about being invisible. But the
Mhm.
reality is, we do live in a culture that historically, anyway, and I hope it's changing day to day, but it's a slow process, does tend to prioritize youthful beauty in women and not not honor elders. And
Yeah.
so the more that we can do that for ourselves and
Mhm.
recognize, affirm every day, like practice, steep ourselves in the power, which I see every day, of women in groups and what we can do for one another, the better.
Yeah, and because we can change the narrative if we own our own power.
100%.
Right. Yeah, I think you and I both are on a mission to help women do that. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny. I like to keep these right. You, I mean, the question I have, I'm wondering if people are gonna want to know about your divorce workshop. Do you put that on Revel, or
Yeah.
where would people find out about
I actually, I'm going to be offering it in January on Revel, a little mini
that?
one.
Okay.
But I do, if anyone wants to click on, not click on, whatever, it's untied.net. You like untied, an apron untied, untied.net. My friend Elise Pettis started it. And
Okay.
she's now doing, she does in-person things, which is before the pandemic. I did all of the workshops with her, not with her, but under the auspices of Untied in Elise's beautiful Brooklyn Heights living room. But since then, we're doing Zoom workshops as well.
That's nice. I mean, because it
Yeah,
opens up to the women across the country
yes,
that way,
yeah.
even though.
100%. So I think I'm going to be leading one with Elise via Zoom in January, in addition to doing something with Elise around grief and gratitude on Revel in January.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Revel is a free platform.
Yep. Totally free. We're now,
Everybody
I've been
should
with
just.
Revel. Sorry, I've been with Revel for a year. I think we were at 9,000 members when I started. We're now at over 33,000 members around the country and increasingly in cities around the world. And we are, we have our arms open wide, a wide welcome, a hearty welcome to anyone who identifies as a woman in midlife and beyond, who are looking to reimagine ourselves as we grow.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much and have a very happy holiday.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.